Was Nate Wiggins the right pick for the Baltimore Ravens at number 30 in the 2024 NFL Draft? We'll talk about that and so much more coming up next year in this episode of Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire, coming to you from the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Thank you so much for being here, making Locked On Ravens your first listen each and every single day for an available all podcasting platforms. That includes a video form on YouTube and audio form wherever you get your shows 5 days a week, plus more. This week we're doing 7 because of the draft of Ravens content. We got news, analysis, updates for you. So tell a friend, tell a family member we are here for them on Locked On Ravens. Today's episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free. LinkedIn.com/LockedOnNFL. That's LinkedIn.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Day one of the draft is over. We are here on Friday. Thursday was busy. Let me tell you, I was on streams for, about 7 hours. And it was a crazy day, crazy draft, crazy round one. The Ravens, they select Nate Wiggins, the corner from Clemson, at pick number 30. Now for Baltimore, another pick invested in the defensive back room, another pick invested in defense in general. We'll talk about if Nate Wiggins was the right pick for the Baltimore Ravens in the first part of the show. Then we'll move into more of how Wiggins impacts the Ravens cornerback room, how they can utilize guys, and even a bit of what it could mean for some of the other positions on the defense as well. Then finally, we get into some of who Baltimore can actually get on day two, what needs they should be looking at, and a lot more. We did a live stream. I'm recording this right after I did the live stream and talked a lot about this, but I want to dive more in depth on it as well. So I did a 2 a.m. live stream. So if you want to go back, check out my instant reaction to the pick, be sure to check that out. Really appreciate everybody who was in the live for that as well. I know it's late. And the fact you're spending your time with me on Locked On Ravens, whether you're an everyday or a first timer or somewhere in the middle, it really means a lot to me. Let's get into the Wiggins pick. First of all, Wiggins is somebody that has speed. As a corner, can run with the best of them, right? He's a 6'1" guy. The frame isn't huge. It's a slender frame. He gets washed out on some plays and get overmatched physically on some plays as well, but that doesn't mean he doesn't play physical. Wiggins can play physical. He's someone that tries to be around the ball. The ball production isn't really there. Only 3 interceptions in his 3 years in college. But in an NFL game, and this is why I like the pick, in an NFL game that has become speed, especially on offense, teams love building those track teams. Eric Acosta talked about how he would love to build the Ravens a track team, how he's tried to build the Ravens a track team. In this league, you need fast cornerbacks, or at least one guy that can run with the best of them, one guy that can run with the fastest of them. Wiggins can be that player for the Ravens. And the Ravens, they have a prototypical type of cornerback, and they were certainly leaning into that last year. Marlon Humphrey, big physical guy. Brandon Stevens, big physical guy. Wiggins doesn't have that big frame, but 4.28 speed, someone that can give you an option to put on the speedsters. And look, we know in the AFC, there are plenty of speedsters across the league. I mean, the Chiefs literally last night just added Xavier Worthy, and that's a guy who has speed. We talked all about him at the Combine. Wasn't necessarily a fit for what Baltimore wanted to do, in my opinion. But to me, I think that for Wiggins, you can line him up on a guy like Worthy and not have to worry. The recovery speed on Wiggins, if he gets beat off the line, Wiggins can catch up to a guy, force a deflection. That's stuff you need in today's league, right? The league is changing every single year. Every year, new narratives come out, new ways to win happen, and everything that happens in a league, it's different from year to year. But something that's been consistent recently is getting speed guys, winning with speed guys, and we've seen that across the league. So how do you combat speed? With more speed. I mean, that's how you do it. So that's why I like this a lot for the Ravens. It was definitely a BPA pick, but a pick that still fell within a need for the Ravens too. It wasn't like they took a tight end or anything crazy, a defensive lineman in the first round, running back. Wasn't that. There's some uncertainty with the cornerback room moving forward here. We'll get to that a little bit more in the second part of the show. With Brandon Stevens not being under contract, Marlon Humphrey's contract, as I've talked about, is going to be a topic of conversation. To me, I feel like the way the draft unfolded too, if we're talking about needs, we all know offensive line is the biggest need for the Ravens. That's not a secret. We've talked about it for months here on Locked On Ravens. But the way the board fell, that's how you dictate these kind of things, where we don't know it till it happens, right? We can do all these mock drafts. We have mock draft Monday every Monday, and we don't know what's going to happen until it happens. The way the board fell, there wasn't an offensive lineman really worthy of being picked at 30. Tyler Guyton goes at 29. That would have been the last guy I would have taken there. I personally wanted to take Jordan Morgan at 30. I feel like he was a second-round guy at best. So, I mean, Packers took him. That's fine. But Marius Mims was gone. Troy Fautanu was gone. You know, all those guys were gone. So you take out offensive tackle or offensive line, you know, even Graham Barton. So you take out offensive line. Corner-wise, there were a lot of good guys available. The corner class got pushed down because quarterbacks went super early, and then the offensive line run came after that. So corners got pushed down. Kenyon Mitchell goes 22 to Philadelphia, I believe, and 24 it was Detroit trading up to get Terrion Arnold. So the Ravens had their choice of Kool-Aid McKinstry, Cooper DeJean, and Nate Wiggins, but Baltimore seemingly loved Nate Wiggins. Eric DeCosta, John Harbaugh could not stop gushing about this guy. I mean, literally, DeCosta saying what he was a top 15, 20 player on their board, 13, something along those lines. The pick also, if you were watching the draft, the pick came in really, really quickly. So it felt like Baltimore was kind of sitting on their toes a little bit, saying, oh, come on. And they said, boom, all right, he's available, boom, get that card in. So, hey, you know what? The Ravens got their guy. To me, I think that at that point, and we had talked about this too, the Ravens probably had a bunch of different guys they would have felt comfortable taking at 30. But it depends on their board. And Wiggins was that high on their board. It means that, you know, there are a certain number of players where you could have said, all right, yeah, we can trade back. That can happen, and we'll get the draft cap. Whatever DeCosta said, he had about 8 different trades that he was offered for people trying to move back up into the first round, whether it was to take a wide receiver, to take an offensive lineman. There were still plenty of options for teams to take, but Baltimore felt good enough with Wiggins. Now, some of the concern here, if you want to talk about that, I talked about a little bit with the frame, but how often is Wiggins going to play? That is something where a lot of people are kind of wondering, and I see that as some of the backlash of the pick I've seen on social media. Here's what I'll say about that, and I've said it on the live stream a bunch. The Ravens love 3 cornerback rotations, especially on the outside. You want to talk about Brandon Carr and Jimmy Smith. They draft Marlon Humphrey in 2017, literally kind of like the exact same situation here in 2024, where Marlon, that corner position wasn't a position of need, at least a big one in terms of they have nobody. They have guys this year. They had guys back in 2017. But you take a guy not just for this year, this upcoming season, but you take a player for the future. And that's what they did with Marlon. Marlon still played his rookie season. He played in tandem with those guys. I expect the same thing with Nate Wiggins. And with Wiggins, the versatility is there too. You can line him up outside. You can line him up in the slot. And that's part of the conversation we're going to have in the second part of the show about how Wiggins can impact the Ravens cornerback room, because you can now get super funky with what you want to do with some of those guys, such as a Marlon Humphrey, maybe even a Kyle Hamilton. So his versatility on the outside in the slot, you want to experiment with him at safety if you can. He has that. And the Ravens love their versatile pieces on the defensive side of the ball. Positionless defense also has become more of a thing, not just for the Ravens, but also throughout the league. So it wouldn't shock me if Baltimore tries to move him all around the field, see where he feels most comfortable. But to me, he couldn't have gone wrong with any of the 3 of Kool-Aid McKinstry, Cooper DeJean, and Nate Wiggins. Obviously, all 3 of them a bit of a different story, bit of a different player. But I don't hate what the Ravens did, especially seeing the Chiefs take Xavier Worthy. They trade up with Buffalo at 28. So you see that, you see the speed across the league, and you say, all right, how do you combat speed again? It's with the speed. I literally said it. So I give this pick again. It's not like I am, over the moon, everything along those lines. But I do think that this was a pick that you look at how the board fell. You look at the NFL today. You look at the future potential of Nate Wiggins. You look at how he can potentially add weight. You can add weight to Wiggins in his frame. You can add that to the frame of Wiggins, but you can't teach speed. can't teach instincts, can't teach a lot of the things Wiggins has. So you take a chance on that. You expect him to play in year one. Hopefully he does. You can't afford to not play him a bunch. So I would say, yeah, this was the right pick based off of how the board fell. You could have argued for an A.D. Mitchell or Xavier Legette. But again, I think that for Wiggins, it comes down to who you think the best corner out of those three were: McKinstry, DeJean, and Wiggins. And what other needs were there for Baltimore? Maybe you had a position higher up on the board than they did. But for Wiggins, I think a solid overall pick for the Ravens. I think he's going to be a quality piece on this defense for a really long time. Coming up, we're talking about how Wiggins impacts the Ravens cornerback room. Guys like Marlon Humphrey and a lot more. Stay tuned. Plan to talk about here on Locked On Ravens. First, this show is brought to you by LinkedIn. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. I've had a ton of great experiences over on LinkedIn, whether it's finding jobs, networking, connecting. LinkedIn really does have it all, and it makes it really easy to find a bunch of different features. Plus, LinkedIn isn't just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job but might be open to the perfect role. They give it a month. Over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is constantly finding ways to make the process easier too. They even just launched a feature that helps write job descriptions, making the process even easier and quicker. 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. Post your job for free at LinkedIn.com/LockedOnNFL. That's LinkedIn.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply.
This episode of your favorite Locked On podcast is brought to you by the best meal kit service in the game, Home Chef. No more having to answer the dreaded question, what are we going to do for dinner tonight? Thanks to Home Chef and their chef design recipes that are delivered directly to my door, all pre-packaged, pre-portioned. They even peel the garlic cloves for you. And each recipe, one of my favorites, Black and Mahi, comes with a full page of easy to read instructions that include customization options and pictures to guide you along the way through the step-by-step process so you don't have to ask, is that what chard looks like? I cannot recommend Home Chef enough, especially right now, because for a limited time, Home Chef is giving Locked On listeners 18 free meals, free dessert for life, and of course, free shipping on your first box if you head to homechef.com/lockedon today. That's homechef.com/lockedon for 18 free meals and free dessert for life. Yes, you heard that right. Homechef.com/lockedon. Must be an active subscriber to receive free dessert.
We're back, our second segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher here with you on this Friday. Really appreciate everybody for tuning in today. Talking Nate Wiggins, talking NFL Draft. Day 2 coming up. We'll have it this evening, so that'll be super exciting. We'll be going live later after Day 2 is over, talking about what the Ravens did, who they selected again. Plus, there'll be a bonus episode coming out 6 a.m. on Saturday tomorrow, so be sure to stay tuned for all of that. But Nate Wiggins, the pick at number 30, obviously, out of Clemson. A player that really is coming in here. He said his visit to Baltimore was good. It felt like home. Feels like he's excited to be a member of the Ravens, which, of course, you always want that, right? But Wiggins and his arrival is going to impact some of the ways that Baltimore does things in the cornerback room. And I think it's a good thing. One of the ways, I think with Marlon Humphrey, you can now experiment a little bit. If you want to put Wiggins on the outside and want to throw Marlon in the slot on some of these plays, you can do that. Maybe you want to throw Kyle Hamilton down on the slot in some plays, give Marlon a little break. It gives the Ravens some versatility as well, plus some injury insurance, right? I think with Marlon, the reason why the Ravens were able to kind of keep their defense together and the reason it was such a good unit last year consistently was because they had the depth necessary. Ronald Darby was a big part of what they did. Marlon went down for a couple of injuries, and Darby was able to step in, right? Really able to produce. And you hope Wiggins can give you that. I mean, you talk about Darby, talk about Geno Stowe, and talk about these players that were the glue to this defense. So not only should Wiggins be playing a lot when everybody is healthy, again, if you took him here at 30 for the Ravens, you have to play him. But to me, if a guy does go down, injuries happen in football. Injuries happen all the time in football, right? It's just inevitable. The Ravens will have a really quality player in Nate Wiggins. Now, Wiggins didn't have a ton of tackles in college. It's usually a good thing when you're a cornerback and you play a high-level role because of the fact that means either teams aren't throwing at you or you're forcing incompletion. So Wiggins is somebody who, in terms of coverage, in terms of man, and, all this different stuff that he can do coverage-wise, a lot of people have him as the best cover corner in this class. He's a sticky player, recovery speed, as we've talked about. Again, the interceptions didn't translate to college, only 3 of them, but you have other players that can get, and plus Wiggins will probably get a couple of his own, especially in a defense you now have Roquan Smith, Justin Madubuike, Kyle Hamilton, those players playing around Wiggins. It should play to his strengths. Plus, with a guy like Wiggins, you can trust him in one-on-one coverage against some of these speedier receivers, as we talked about. So you don't have to feel as worried about sending somebody over the top potentially if a guy gets beat super badly, because Wiggins can run with that guy, and you can trust that in one-on-one covers as opposed to maybe a slower corner that can't keep up. So you're going to double cover a guy. If a guy's running deep, you're going to send that safety up over the top to prevent the deep ball. Wiggins can sometimes do that on his own. I think that's very valuable when you're talking about the versatility of this Ravens defense, sneaking Kyle Hamilton up towards the line, sending a guy on slot blitzes like Arthur Millette, who we saw get really, really good at that last season. So it just helps out a lot of things with Baltimore and what they want to do. Zach Orr should be very happy about this pick, him being a year 1 D coordinator for the Ravens, an NFL D coordinator year 1. And he's getting a guy, Nate Wiggins, who will be able to solve a lot of issues on his own. That to me is one part of this that's really good. The other part of this to me that's really good is the fact that now Baltimore, it's not just about Wiggins and his versatility, but it's about the other players and their versatility. We saw Marlon have a great slot season when he needed to be in there, right? A couple of years ago, injuries were rampant in the corner room. And that's what it is too, right? I think it was Isaac Newsom who said it, right? You can't have enough corners. You can never have enough corners. The Ravens in 2014 were signing guys off the street to go play the divisional round, right? Like, that's how bad it got. So you can never have enough corners. I wouldn't even be shocked again if the Ravens double dip potentially at cornerback. That would be something that maybe not a lot of fans will be super happy with, but you know what? I think it would potentially be possible here for what the Ravens just, they love it. And they invest in in their secondary. $70 million contract to Marcus Williams, Marlon Humphrey, first round pick, Brandon Stevens, day 2 pick, Kyle Hamilton, day 1 pick, Nate Wiggins, day 1 pick. They invest in their secondary. It was not shocking to me that Baltimore did this, but I think Wiggins impacts the Ravens corner room in a very positive way as he's able to go and provide versatility, speed, and also some toughness where he will get washed out on some plays, right? The slender frame, he does tend to get washed out on some plays, overmatched, especially against those bigger receivers, A.J. Brown type frame, DK Metcalf type frames. But he competes. He's a tough competitor. So what you want in a guy. Pass breakup, sticky in coverage, everything that he does, I think, fits what Baltimore's MO is. I know the arm length also is a bit of a concern in terms of, I think he has around 30.5-inch arms, if I'm not mistaken. So that's one other thing you got to recognize with him. Also, I think he had a hip flexor thing at the combine. But to me, you could talk about Kool-Aid McKinstry. He had the foot thing at the combine, right? Cooper DeJean, I think, really solid prospect, but there are some question marks with him too. There are always going to be question marks with players. And then when you look at the pros, you look at the cons, you look at how he can impact not only the corner room, but the defense. I think the Ravens did a really good job here with Nate Wiggins, and not necessarily shocking. If they were going to take a corner, you wanted one that fits today's NFL. I think a speed corner, the way that he runs with 4.28 40, I mean, look, that fits what the NFL is moving into and has moved into right now. Coming up, though, we're going to be talking about day 2 here today. Who can the Ravens get on day 2? What positions should they be looking at? And a lot more. Stay tuned. We got a lot to get to here on Locked On Ravens. First, the show is brought to you by Monopoly Go. I've been told I'm a competitive person, and it definitely is true. I do have a competitive side. We all do. My competitive side is a big fan of Monopoly Go. I'm sure you've heard of it. It's been downloaded over 150 million times. It's a great twist on Monopoly where you play on not one but hundreds of Monopoly boards in crazy locations, building up amazing cities that bring you big money. But the best part is messing with my friends. I can charge them running iconic properties, just like classic Monopoly, but now I can also heist their vaults of riches for myself, and leaderboards show me who the biggest Monopoly tycoon is. But it's not just my competitive side that loves it. You can team up now with your friends and people all around the world in time tournaments to earn huge rewards. So get in on the game and join your friends. Download Monopoly Go now, free on the App Store or Google Play. We're back, Locked On Ravens, our final segment of this Purple Friday, Draft Purple Friday. Kevin Oestreicher still with you here. Really appreciate everybody for tuning in to the show. Be sure to subscribe, follow along, video form and audio form for 5 days a week of Ravens content. This is my 1,235th consecutive episode of Not Missed the Show. Monday through Friday, we bring you Ravens content, and I mean that literally every single Monday through Friday. Holidays, whenever, dead time in the off season, we're bringing you Ravens content. Plus, of course, as I mentioned, we're going to go live again after day 2 of the draft. We're going to be talking about who the Ravens got, so be sure to stay tuned for that later tonight. Also, we're going to get into another bonus episode on Saturday. We'll go live after day 3 of the draft on Saturday, then another bonus episode on Sunday. So this is the busiest week of the year for me. It's a grind. I mean, these are late nights. There are a bunch of hours on camera, but it's all worth it. Plus, we have an amazing community here on Locked On Ravens, both in video form, in audio form, social media, subtext. Really appreciate everybody who's been rocking with me now, whether you're new, whether this is your first time here, or if you've been here every day. Again, really appreciate that. Now, who can Baltimore get on day 2? Let's talk about some positions first of all. Offensive line has to be the priority here. I understand the Ravens going corner on day 1, them not loving the remaining offensive line options. You throw that out the window here. There are going to be enough day 2 prospects, round 2, round 3 prospects, where you can get at least one of these guys, and now we're in the territory of it not being necessarily a plug-and-play player. Round 1, as I talked about with Nate Wiggins, you got to play him. You got to play your first-round pick. I mean, you're in a spot right now where you can't afford to waste that value. That's what, for example, makes the Michael Penix Jr. pick in Atlanta just so perplexing and honestly just so bad, because they waste a very valuable draft asset on a quarterback after paying Kirk Cousins $180 million. It's nothing against Michael Penix. It's nothing against him whatsoever. It's just the Falcons could have used that on an edge rusher. It's just you can't waste that asset. And the 8th pick obviously is a lot more valuable than the 30th, but it goes to show that you have to be able to manage your assets the right way. I think Baltimore did. I think Atlanta did not. And Baltimore's done it for a really long time now. But you have to manage these other assets the right way too. On day 2, the Ravens will have 2 picks in the day 2 area here, 1 in the 2nd, 1 in the 3rd. Obviously, that is pending any sort of trades we get, which you cannot rule that out with Eric Costa. Now, the big guys left on the board, the big names, A.D. Mitchell, Keon Coleman, Patrick Paul, some of those guys, they're not going to be there. You have to wonder, if you're Baltimore, if there is a fall, because we talked about it in the first round too. If there's a fall of a guy into maybe the early to mid 40s, maybe 50s, do you make a move up to get a guy? Because I thought they could have been in prime trade-out spot for Terrion Arnold, but they ended up not making that move. They get Nate Wiggins, and I think it worked out for him. But if there's a really quality offensive lineman, if Patrick Paul does fall, Dominic Puny, Haynes from Connecticut, you got Kieran and Kingsley and all these guys, right? If one of those guys starts to fall, I think you should make a move up if you're the Ravens. I think you can get a wide receiver on day 2 also. Jalen Polk is one. I mean, I don't think Coleman or Mitchell is going to be there. I'm not really going to spend too much time on them. But Lam McConkey is one as well. I mean, there are others. Troy Franklin, if you're a Troy Franklin believer, maybe you like him a lot. But to me, I think that the Ravens can end day 2. I mean, ideally it'd be an offensive lineman and a wide receiver. And then from there, you can kind of just fill out the rest of your needs in day 3. Running back, if Eric Costa was very vocal about that, you take probably multiple offensive linemen. I wouldn't be shocked, honestly, if the Ravens took multiple offensive linemen on day 2, if they used both their picks on offensive linemen. Because I kind of went that route in my final Locked On Ravens mock draft. It was mock draft Sunday, but it was a Thursday edition of mock draft Sunday. And I had the Ravens taking Xavier Legette. Obviously, that did not work out. He went to Carolina at 32. But then I had the Ravens taking Haynes. Then I had him taking, who I have him taking at 92 or 93? Who? It was, wasn't Kingsley. It was Kieran. I had him taking Kieran out of BYU at number 93. So to me, you can have that. If you take a guard, you take a tackle, that gives you enough really quality prospects to have competition. Again, it's going to be competition. Ben Cleveland, Ninja Voorhees, Daniel Falele, those players, Josh Jones, they're all going to be competing. And with day 2 prospects, you throw those guys into the fire and say, hey, go win that job. I certainly think Baltimore can do that. But the wide receiver conversation is one that we have to have as well, because even with Rashad Bateman on the roster, the reason that I was so adamant that, hey, don't rule out wide receiver in round one, even with the Bateman extension, is because we were having these conversations about, oh, maybe they can take A.D. Mitchell, maybe they can take Xavier Legette, or maybe Keon Coleman, or some of these guys. We were having those conversations with Bateman factored into the team's 2024 plans. Now that Bateman has signed an extension, you get a little more breathing room just in terms of who's on your roster past this season. If you're Baltimore, both Zay Flowers and Rashad Bateman are now there. But, I mean, let's look at the remaining guys. Again, Tylan Wallace has not proven anything so far. He's also a free agent, I believe, after the season. Nelson Aguilar, free agent after the season. Deontay Hardy, free agent after the season, and not really going to be much of a factor on offense, in my opinion. I think he's primarily going to be a special teams, a returner guy, essentially. So at that point, I mean, I think you do have to add one more playmaker at wide receiver. Now, is that a veteran, or are they going to ignore a wide receiver and go get a veteran? Maybe they trade their third-round pick for a veteran. I wouldn't be mad. Cortland Sutton coming to town. You know, if you've been listening to me on Locked On Ravens for a while now, I've been pounding the table for Cortland Sutton for a long time. I think he fits what the Ravens need. Now, Ladd McConkey is a great player. I still think the Ravens need a bigger-bodied wide receiver. McConkey doesn't fit that. I mean, I think a Jalen Polk would be fine there. There are other guys as well. You know, if you want to push that need back to day 3, I mean, I think 4th round is okay, but offensive line has to be the focus here for the Ravens. They'll do their BPA stuff. I'm not saying they won't. If there aren't enough quality offensive linemen on their board and they really like a guy and the guy slips, they'll take that guy. They've proven they will. You know, it's no secret they're a BPA team. But I don't think I'd feel very good if the Ravens ended both day 1 and day 2 without an offensive lineman, knowing they lost 3 starters and knowing there's so much uncertainty on the line. I'm not saying that, you know, a day 2 pick comes in and immediately solves everything, but it's a talented player you can add into the fold. And I think that's a no-brainer move in itself, just in terms of them getting a guy on the roster, right? You have both guard spots open. You have the tackle spot open. There are a lot of NFL-ready players, and this is a very deep offensive line class. It's not like these guys aren't worth these picks. I think we're going to see a run on offensive linemen pretty early in the 2nd round. Again, guys like Patrick Paul, Dominic Puni, etc. But there are going to be enough guys. I mean, I think Kingsley goes early too, but maybe a Kieran. He's a 2nd or 3rd round guy. It just depends on what the Ravens are looking for. And the other interesting part about that is whether they go interior or exterior guy. How much they believe in a Daniel Falele. How much do they believe in a Ben Cleveland or an Andrew Voorhees. I think we might find out just a little bit of that when it comes to day 2 and what they end up doing there. Other positions I could see them looking at, I mean, I could see them looking edge on day 2 potentially. Other than that, though, I mean, I guess a shocker pick, if I had to pick one, defensive line would be one of like, oh, wow, like that, you know, taking, oh, whoa. I think they've been doing their homework on edge guys, though, and I wouldn't be shocked if it's an offensive lineman and an edge guy. I think that's probably the combination. I'd be floored if they didn't take an offensive lineman on day 2. I think everybody listening will be floored if they didn't take an offensive lineman on day 2. But Nate Wiggins, the Ravens' first-round pick, number 30 speedy corner out of Clemson, coming to Baltimore. So happy here today on Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll be back here again later tonight. So be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel here. Turn notifications on. If you can't watch live, it'll of course be available after the fact for replay, both video and audio form. And again, subscribe, follow along, video form, audio form for 5 days a week, plus more daily Ravens content. I'll see you right back here soon on Locked On Ravens.